Welcome to the Capital Confidential podcast. I'm Dan Clark, author of the Capital Confidential newsletter and your new host. We are chugging along on this relaunch. But what's not chugging along is high-speed rail in New York. It's been talked about for decades. Governor George Pataki made a push for it when he was in office, but that didn't go anywhere. But now there's renewed interest in high-speed rail with one member of the legislature leading the charge. We'll get to that a little bit later, but first, you probably heard this week that Governor Kathy Hochul and the legislature finally reached a deal on the state budget. We're still waiting for details, so I thought we could jump ahead this week and talk about post-budget priorities. The Times Union's Raga Justin is with me this week. Hi, Raga.
Hello, good morning.
So we kind of have a budget deal and we don't know the details, but what I'm interested is looking at what we do after the budget. And I don't know if lawmakers necessarily have their own agendas for that just yet. There are a few things that I'm watching. This week, medical aid in dying passed the Assembly. Mm-hmm. We don't know if it's going to pass the Senate. And I know that you spoke to the Senate sponsor, Brad Hoylman-Siegel, yesterday for a second about it. What did he say?
I think he was expressing confidence, as you always do when you're a sponsor of one of these kind of high-profile pieces of legislation. He said, I'm confident that we'll be able to bring it to the floor. I'm confident that because the Assembly, took this sort of historic step with this bill, that the Senate is not far behind. Whether that's actually the case, though, I think is up for debate. As you know, we heard the Senate Majority Leader talk about it yesterday, and I don't know if what you got from that was confidence, but to me it read as, I might not have the votes. I might not be able to pass this.
Yeah, no, I read it the exact same way. It was almost like her saying, I'm not going to bring it to the floor if it doesn't have the votes, and also we're going to have a conversation about it. And whenever they say we're going to have a conversation about it, that makes me think okay, so this isn't settled there.
Right.
They have work to do if they actually want to pass this.
100%. And maybe they are having conversations about it.
Right.
Because I would imagine the Assembly, taking that step must have prompted some sort of soul searching within the chamber. Don't you think? I mean,
yeah.
The Senate probably was discussing this, and I don't know that all of them are on board with something this sort of massive and major. I don't know.
I don't know either. And in the Assembly, I get the sense that things changed because new members were elected. Like when Amy Pollin was talking about it yesterday, the Assembly sponsor, she kind of said, well, some members left, some members came in, and she said that she lobbied the new members and said, hey, you're new here. This bill has been here for a while. Let me tell you why we should pass it. And then it made it to the floor. In the Senate, there aren't a ton of new members this year. It's 2025. So in 2024, I think we had 2 or 3 new Democrats elected. C.L. Albino, Christopher Ryan, and I'm forgetting whoever else was elected. Sorry for that. So I don't know. That's one of those things. The other one that I'm really looking at this year is the Grieving Families Act. It is that bill that would allow grief and anguish to be eligible when you do a wrongful death lawsuit. And it has not done well, I should say. It's actually passed both chambers unanimously, so it actually has done very well. But then once it makes it to the governor's desk, it's been vetoed. And for whatever reason, the legislature has decided not to override that veto any of the years, despite it, again, passing unanimously in both chambers. So I'm curious if they give it another try, and I just don't know.
I don't know either. I wonder at what point you look at it and you say, we've done all we can. Well, we haven't done all we can, but we've done all we're prepared to do.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it's up to her. That's an interesting bill because the debate on it is so... it's just a very divisive, I think, concept because you've got people who are saying it just like the medical aid in dying, it's an issue of compassion. And you've got other people saying, no, it's an issue of practicality. The consequences of this could be greater than we're prepared to admit. With the Grieving Families Act, I think the damages could exceed thousands, millions of dollars more than the state theoretically could handle. And, there's all this talk about insurance premiums going up and everything. And I don't know that Hochul is really, she might be reading the tea leaves on that and being like, I don't know that that's the best thing to do for the state. And she's been very consistent about that.
And I don't think that her position will change in the sense that the main people who have lobbied against this are municipalities in terms of New York City hates this, localities hate this, because suddenly they would be on the hook for a lot of money in a wrongful death lawsuit. Same thing with hospitals, which is a little concerning because I hope there aren't any wrongful deaths in hospitals, but I get where they're coming from. So from her perspective, I see it as this is a fiscal issue in her mind,
right?
Where she can't bankrupt local governments.
Right.
Even though that may not happen. We just don't know.
And you've got other Democrats saying, well, in the absence of actual, evidence that this would bankrupt local governments, this is a moral issue. And you're sort of taking the less moral approach.
Right. That's one of those bills that is very much wait and see, because they introduced it, they reintroduced it in February, I think, and the language is not significantly different or at all different from last year's version. So I have to assume if they're going to pass it again, they're going to amend it or just pass it with the expectation that she's going to veto it again.
Right.
So we will see. That's usually an end of session bill. So TBD on that. Another bill that I'm looking at is, and I don't have the title in front of me, and I always get it wrong, but it's the Packaging and Manufacturing Reduction Act. I don't know what it's called, but it's called Extended Producer Responsibility, where the people who make the packaging or that force us to accept the packaging, I should say, would then be responsible in some way of making sure that it's recycled or disposed of properly. You would get less cardboard in your Amazon box or less plastic packaging. I hate plastic packaging.
Me too.
I need scissors to open it up. First off,
despise it.
Yeah. Why? Some of this stuff, some of the adhesives that they use on this stuff, I swear you could repair the International Space Station with, because I'll get it and I'll open it up and I will be trying to rip it apart.
No, 100%. It's military grade plastic.
Yeah. And then I have to go grab a chainsaw or something to get it apart.
You're casual. You've got a chainsaw just lying around in your deck.
Yeah. Well, yes. So if they don't pass this bill, that's an idea for them. Please help me. Dan is now in the business of advising the legislature which bills to pass. I just, and if I can't pull it apart, somebody who has issues with their hands, forget about it.
Done.
You might as well just send it back.
Done. I'm a frequent purchaser off of eBay, and sometimes the sellers that I'm buying from send me things wrapped in old scarves, little Debbie's boxes that are just being reused. Once I got it, just kind of a tiny little Ziploc baggie. I'm usually ordering little trinkets or books or something. So I don't know. There are creative ways to package your materials, and I feel like that's a lesson that some of these manufacturers need to learn. I'd love to receive a scarf along with my package. That was a crazy one. Delightful. So there's that bill. And the interesting thing about that is that bill has gained a lot of support in the past year. But there's a competing bill now that is a little bit, it puts the onus a little bit less on industry to invest in local recycling infrastructure. So I think there's a battle between the bills right now. The Business Council is very involved in this legislation. So as they so often are. No, exactly. They're looking at everything. They have a stake in everything. So that's that. What's on your mind for end of session? Anything that you got? I'm trying to think conceptually here because I'm not as good as you with the specific bills. Medical aid and dying, obviously. I'd be so interested to see if that goes through the Senate. Oh, well, something actually that you've covered this year, and me too, is CDPAP. Oh, I'm not even going to explain what it is, because if you don't know what it is, just go online and read our coverage. It's so much to explain. Type in Dan Clark and Times Union and CDPAP, and there's a treasure trove. Yeah, I think CDPAP, I've heard some kind of rumors floating out there that, because essentially the state has kicked this very important deadline for the kind of transition of this very popular home care program. They've kicked it down the road to June, I believe. Yeah. That is session time in the meantime. If you're actually seriously interested in fixing this, as the legislature has said they are, then you've got time to do something about it, right? I mean, Senator Gustavo Rivera is very vocal about this. He thinks that there's a lot of tweaks that can be done, through the legislature, as opposed to the budget, which this was a budget change from last year that we're sort of dealing with the ramifications of now. Yeah, I don't know if you heard anything about whether they'll take it up.
No, and that's the thing. It's complicated for them, I think, because they have to first admit that they did this last year. So they set this into motion.
Yeah.
And the things that are happening now with the aides not getting paid, people losing their home care, it did not come out of nowhere. I mean, take it from me, the person who has written about this for like the past year. They were talking about this last July and have been talking about it since then, every single time that they can. So when it got to this point, nobody can be surprised. And I'm curious if they are going to actually do something, or if they're going to try to pressure maybe the Department of Health to clean up the mess. I don't know. But I do know it looks like the Department of Health is starting to shift the blame onto Public Partnerships, the company, which I think we all saw coming. And I don't know how that ends, because they have a very lucrative contract with them. And I would assume that they don't want to break that contract.
I don't see a future where they're breaking that contract. I see a future where what you're saying exactly is that they just continue to shift blame. PPL continues to do the work or not do the work. And everyone just sort of chugs along. And the people who suffer at the end of the day are the consumers, the patients who are enrolled in this program, and the people who aren't getting paid. So
that's right. Speaking of chugging along, do you have an opinion on high-speed rail, Raga?
I don't have an opinion on high-speed rail, Dan. I wish I did, because it's theoretically something I'm interested in. I do love Amtrak. Hearing not great things about Amtrak, though, some of the service improvements that they're making, right? It's kind of slowing down some of the service.
Yeah, I don't know. Between Albany and New York City.
Albany and New York City, yeah, which is like, where else are you going?
Yeah.
From Albany.
Boston, Buffalo, Canada.
Okay.
So with that, we're going to switch to high-speed rail with Senator Jeremy Cooney, but first, we're going to take a break.
"12-year-old Jaliek Rainwalker vanished without a trace from a small upstate New York village on a cool November night in 2007. His adoptive parents say he ran away. Police believe he was murdered, but a body has never been found, and a suspect has never been named."
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah,
Appreciate
okay,
that.
all right, but you don't want to talk.
Then when I learned they were trying to undo the adoption, that's when I learned that this story was very complicated, well, a lot more complicated than I even thought.
Almost 2 decades later, the case remains unsolved. I'm Jessica Marshall.
And I'm Wendy Libertar.
In this podcast from the Times-Union, we take a deep dive into the mystery of this missing child and try to find some answers.
So have you come to terms that Jaliek is probably dead?
Yes. I feel that he was killed on November 1st, 2007.
Available now, wherever you listen to podcasts.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times-Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times-Union subscriber today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome back to the Capital Confidential podcast. I'm Dan Clark, the author of the Capital Confidential newsletter, and a guy who's sick of driving everywhere. I'd love to visit Buffalo more often, but it's 4 hours by car. It's 5 hours if I want to take the train. and even longer by bus. But in Japan, you can travel about the same distance on high-speed rail in just 2 hours. So why can't we have that here? Joining me today to help answer that question is State Senator Jeremy Cooney, a Democrat from Rochester and the chair of the Transportation Committee. Senator Cooney, thanks for being here.
Glad to be with you.
So let's talk first about what the state of high-speed rail is in New York right now. We don't have it, obviously, but tell me we have some bare bones of it. This has been talked about for 2 to 3 decades now. So set us up for where we are in that conversation right now.
Absolutely. Well, first, let's just talk about what the reality is in terms of travel from west to east in New York State by passenger rail. To go from Niagara Falls to New York City is about 9 hours and 40 minutes, which is actually longer because of the stops along the way than to get into a personal automobile and to drive by car, which is about 7 hours. So that's the reality in New York, is that we see a large interest in high-speed rail or just passenger rail in general. We know from our friends at Amtrak that tickets are selling, that there is a high demand for tickets. But, the speed really changes the experience and the type of passenger who would be interested in riding and traveling the state or commuting across the state or what have you. And so what we're seeing is, despite New York State doing a high-speed rail study back in 2006, and let me just say, that report recommended a number of steps for high-speed rail in New York State. And if we had done the things that 2006 report had recommended, we would have high-speed rail here in 2025.
Well, can I interrupt you
we
and just ask, what were some of those recommendations?
Well, a lot of it was considering the actual route, the corridor, if you will, and the types of investments that were needed. Less about the technology, which obviously has only increased since 2006, but more so, would it be involved adding an additional rail line alongside our Amtrak route, which, not to get too far into the weeds here, but is owned and operated by CSX, our freight rail manufacturer in New York State. So we would have to add additional line in. We'd have to make sure that there was safety protocols put in place so that freight rail could operate alongside passenger rail at a higher speed. And we've come a long way from that 2006 report. Just last year, when Senator Kennedy was still chair of the Transportation Committee, I was a member of the Transportation Committee. We held a hearing on high-speed rail in New York, and we talked about what the state DOT's plan is to get us to what we call higher speed rail, which is speeds up to 90 miles per hour. Right now, we're kind of much less than that, kind of between 70 and 80 or so miles per hour. And so, that would move us in the right direction, but it would still, this 90B plan that DOT has kind of come up with, would still cost the state over $5.5 billion. It would still take 7 hours to travel between New York City and Niagara Falls. And it has a 25-year construction timeline. So, while I applaud the commitment and interest in the state for looking at higher speed rail, what I think we're seeing across the country, Dan, is states taking a much more aggressive approach to high speed passenger rail. We're talking about speeds up to 125 miles per hour. And that's really where I think we need to be moving in that direction.
So how do we get there, I guess, from where the state's plan looks, that's so drawn out? I mean, in 25 years, we could be, I don't know, all flying in solar-powered helicopters or something like that. I have no idea.
Well, you say that, Dan, but that's actually true. I mean, the technology that's coming across our aviation sector is going to far surpass our rail sector. So by the time we actually get high-speed rail going at the current planning route timetable that we're in, you are going to be flying in what we call VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing vehicles that are, flying at high speeds through our airways. So not that we're going to get to the Jetson scenario, George Jetson flying cars, but there's something in between there. And so for me, it is really about trying to move the conversation forward from just kind of having the same conversation over and over again, which is centered itself around cost primarily, and then talking about the actual route. What I wanted to share with your listeners is that some interesting things are happening with the new Brightline West track, which is being constructed between two major Western cities, Los Angeles to Las Vegas.
Okay.
And they are basically putting a high-speed rail track right down the median of the interstate connection between those two cities. So while you're sitting in traffic, looking at, the traffic jam and blasting the air conditioner and trying to get to Vegas or trying to get to LA, you're going to see this beautiful track right down the median with a high-speed rail flying down and connecting passengers with ease. And the Biden administration put a lot of dollars into that project. It's currently underway right now for construction. And, that's the type of project I'd like to see come to New York. And so when you think about our interstate, right, you think about the Thruway, could that be a space where we put down a track to bring high-speed rail along the Thruway corridor, connecting the Toronto market in Canada to our New York City market, and really looking at the economic benefits of those two hub cities as our points of destination. What I call the 21st century Erie Canal effect, right? Where all of the cities between Toronto and New York City, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, Albany, Yonkers, right? All of these cities kind of get lifted up with this new high-speed rail travel corridor. So that's what I'd like to kind of move the conversation to, as opposed to kind of staying in the Amtrak realm of just looking at our existing footprint.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. So how do we speed it up then, I guess? Is it just a money problem? Is it a regulation problem? As you and I discussed like a few weeks ago, I caught you in the hall and told you that I had read that book Abundance by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson.
Yes.
So
Yes.
high-speed rail is a big part of that book. And it got me thinking of like, how do we cut through the noise here and speed it up so we can have all of these ideas come to fruition? So how do we cut through it, I guess?
Well, I too read Abundance and agree with you that a lot of times, policymakers have these grand ideas, sell the public on it. We know that 60% of Americans hold a favorable opinion of high-speed rail, but then we can't execute. We can't deliver on those promises. So the way to speed this process up here in New York is to put the steps in place now in 2025 with the Trump administration, knowing that Congress may change over in the midterms in 2 years, because a lot of the federal dollars would be necessary for this project to be feasible. So let's do the corridor ID study along the New York State Thruway. We've never done that before. We've had other studies that kind of have looked at the Thruway, but never one specifically dedicated on the Thruway as the primary corridor for high-speed rail to operate. So let's do that now. Let's fund it in the budget this year so that when that study is completed, perhaps we have a Congress or a White House administration that is more open to federal dollars coming in to fund that infrastructure. Canada, interestingly enough, just announced their new high-speed rail connection between Toronto and Quebec City. And they're calling it the Alto Plan. And this Canadian plan is a $3.9 billion plan that is going to not only connect major population hubs, but create thousands and thousands of jobs. And, we can do the same thing here in New York State, but we have to be ready for it. And what we found as I've gone across the country and traveled on some of the high-speed rail that's being built, whether that's in Florida, whether that's in Virginia, the California high-speed rail has not taken off, as you know, from abundance.
Right.
Texas just got a major blow because the Trump administration is pushing back against it. But what has worked is a public-private partnership. And if the federal government and the state government can bring some resources to the table, I think we have an opportunity for the first time in a generation to bring private dollars to the table as well to get this project done, but not done on the back of taxpayers. And that's exciting.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, it makes economic sense from both points, for the government point. And if I'm somebody in industry, I would like to probably improve that industry and get things places that I can't get them now as fast as I can. So that'll be interesting to see what private partner would invest in that and how we work with them and all of that good stuff. But we're out of time. This is something we could talk about for probably hours, but we'll leave it there. Thanks for chatting, Senator Cooney.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And if you want to learn more about what's going on in New York government, you can sign up for the Capitol Confidential newsletter. Find that at capitolconfidential.com. That's Capital with an O. Thanks to the Times-Union and the Hearst Corporation for continuing to take a chance on CapCon. Our theme music for now is Easy Hike by DM. We'll see you next time. Be well.